So this week we saw the Biden administration back a temporary suspension of intellectual property rights for COVID-19 vaccines. Biden's top trade advisor Katherine Tai said on Wednesday that while the US administration believes strongly in intellectual property protections, it would support a waiver of those rules for COVID-19 vaccines. So this proposal is a measure that would allow countries to temporarily override patent rights for pandemic-related medical products. It was first proposed at the World Trade Organization by India and South Africa in October and has since been backed by almost 60 countries. The measure would allow any pharmaceutical manufacturer in the world to make copies of vaccines without fear of being sued for intellectual property infringement. While the proposal will be unlikely to help in the next 6 months due to tight supplies, it could help set up a manufacturing network that could come online in 12 to 18 months from now. The key problem in this situation is that the manufacturing process of the vaccines is very complex, and as such, it is the availability of expertise that is truly holding back production. Despite gaining support from a vast number of emerging countries, the proposal has been opposed by a club of wealthier nations which include the UK, Canada, Australia, the EU, and until now, the US. In a speech to the European University Institute on Thursday, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said that the EU was ready to discuss how the proposal could help address the current crisis in an effective and pragmatic manner. Importantly, she never made any commitments to fall in line with the US and instead insisted that the priority was for vaccine-producing countries to lift barriers to exports and also address supply chain interruptions. German Chancellor Angela Merkel also expressed her opposition to suspending intellectual property rights for COVID-19 vaccines, saying it would have serious implications for vaccine production worldwide. Merkel also added that the limiting factors in vaccine supply were production capacities and the high-quality standards, not the patents. A further view was put forward by Emmanuel Macron, who said that you can transfer the intellectual property to pharma companies in Africa, but they have no platform to make vaccines. But why exactly is intellectual property so important in the pharmaceutical sector? Well, simply put, intellectual property is the way that innovation in this sector is protected. So the pharmaceutical sector fears that if this proposal goes ahead, investors may not be as keen to invest in their technologies without knowing whether at the end they might lose their rights to protect their investment. So as you can imagine, the initiative has been opposed by many parties in the pharmaceutical industry who have argued that it's the manufacturing bottlenecks rather than the patents that are the primary limitation on producing more vaccines. Another issue highlighted by the pharmaceutical sector is that, by disregarding their intellectual property rights, this move will also discourage US innovation and will in turn send jobs abroad. Pharmaceutical companies have mentioned how the technology used in Pfizer and Moderna's vaccines is being trialed to treat other illnesses such as cancer and heart disease, and they claim that suspending their patents would allow other countries to piggyback on US research breakthroughs. Another fear from the pharmaceutical industry is that the administration's move could set a precedent that would make it easier to suspend patents in the future. And again, this would support the argument that entities and investors would be more cautious when investing in pioneering therapies when it comes to the future. The key idea here is that if a scientist is scared that their drug or vaccine could be immediately produced for free in labs around the world, they will be less inclined to develop it. However, on the other hand, campaigners for the proposal have pointed to studies that showed that the Oxford and AstraZeneca vaccine were developed with at least 97% public and charitable funding. Similarly, the technology behind the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines was also funded for decades by taxpayers before being taken up by pharmaceutical companies. This story also casts a link to the international patent dispute which took place over the expensive HIV treatments between pharmaceutical companies and several countries including Brazil and South Africa in the late 1990s. Countries like Brazil, who were struggling to contain the HIV epidemic, wanted to make their own generic versions of HIV drugs. However, pharmaceutical companies who developed them interpreted this as a breach of patent agreements, and this caused a spur in litigation claims. Turning back to the current COVID-19 scenario, a short-term help would be for more countries to give away surplus vaccines and also ease export controls as suggested by Ursula von der Leyen. This would remove any restrictions on vaccine makers on where they send their jabs or ingredients to make them, thus increasing potentially the supply of vaccines around the globe. The World Health Organization is also trying to encourage companies to share their vaccine technology and patents and technological know-how with regional hubs in poorer countries. This is a scheme that launched quite recently and would allow pharmaceutical companies more control over where their intellectual property ends up, while still allowing the world to expand its production. However, a key point to note is that both these proposals will not be able to dramatically increase the availability of vaccines this year. Overall, this is a very interesting story that places COVID-19 at the center of a broader dispute involving the critical importance of intellectual property in the pharmaceutical sector. We shall see how this waiver will actually proceed, as opposing views clash between the pharmaceutical industry and campaigners for the proposal. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch and listen to this video. We hope you enjoyed it. Please make sure you drop us a like, subscribe to the channel for more, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you next time.